It is Wednesday, my dudes, but not just any Wednesday. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin Day, and you are watching The Sweat presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Lotzia, your host for the next 55 minutes, nearly an hour of who to chase and who to fade around the PGA Tour and National Hockey League, which beefcakes to build your NBA lineups around, plus how the latest eye-catching MLB moves could impact future odds on the DK Sportsbook. First things first, though, DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich and Pierce Dietrich, our top two NASCAR experts, are here to analyze some of the biggest free agency moves around the NFL. Yes, they wear many hats. But since we have our two racing experts in the house, we got to mention that F1 Racing DFS has launched on DraftKings with contests already in the lobby for this Saturday's race. Pierce, we will do a full how to play segment with you tomorrow, but for players familiar with NASCAR, what's the biggest difference, at least in DFS with F1?
There are plenty of differences, but it's not going to be a hard transition from NASCAR guys to F1 guys. The one thing that I'll point out here is we look for top fives in NASCAR, top tens in NASCAR from our value drivers. That's in a 40-car field. We have a 20-car field, so you have to adjust. Top five roughly is a top three. A top 10 in NASCAR could translate into a top five in F1. But here's the kicker. In NASCAR, we get those value guys sneaking into the top 10. A value driver is not going to sneak into the top five. You're going to have to adjust your approach. You're going to have to lower the bar and look for different results. But that's going to be saved for a later show. So just for now, translate a top five into a podium and a top 10 into a top five.
All right, Jeff, what excites you the most here about DraftKings going F1?
Well, I mean, A, it's another sport, but B, this is all about the car, baby. I mean, you got to understand what these teams are bringing, who's testing well, who's not. I'm telling you right off the bat, Mercedes looking like a complete fade for week one of F1 racing here. I'm going to give out a little sleeper because I'm not going to be around tomorrow to do like the full preview with Pierce. I'm going to leave the technical stuff to him, but AlphaTauri might be your sleeper pick for race one. I'm just going to throw that out there for now. We got a lot more to go through here, but this looks like a pretty fun format. This is all like, you know, technical. This is going to be fun, man. I mean, Pierce will have tons of nerdy stuff to say about it.
Absolutely. And my fun fact, Mercedes, 3 E's that are pronounced differently in that word. All right, let's get to the NFL here, guys. Listen, man, you mentioned it. All I do is add to it. One of the bigger stories here as we shift gears to the NFL. Yesterday was the Falcons emerging as a surprise link to controversial quarterback Deshaun Watson. So the two sides will reportedly meet today. This could also just be a whole lot of smoke, dudes. How much would you like the potential marriage for Watson's fantasy value, Jeff?
So, yeah, I mean, look, we got to put on our, like, just speculation hats here. The Matt Ryan contract, we could talk for ages. But let's just say that Deshaun Watson has an actual shot of going to Atlanta right now. If he did go there, I think Deshaun Watson is an instant top 3 fantasy quarterback. And then there's a couple reasons why. It really has nothing to do with the weapons around him. I mean, obviously Atlanta heading into like a very thin wide receiver crew, but that doesn't really matter as much with a mobile quarterback like Deshaun Watson. What matters is that the Falcons were one of the worst teams in sacking opposing quarterbacks last year. Their defense is just going to allow a ton of points. They're going to play at a faster pace, and they're going to be in a dome environment. Deshaun Watson would just rack up fantasy points like it was an arcade game every week with Atlanta. So I think this is a very good spot for him for fantasy purposes, and I think they would obviously address the wide receiver position in the draft. So whether this is actually going to come to fruition or not, I have no idea, but this would be a fantastic spot. If you have a Deshaun Watson in a dynasty draft or something right now, you should be praying this happens because I don't see that defense improving enough to really make an impact, and I think Deshaun Watson would just be in garbage time heaven all season starting in 2022. So.
All right, Pierce, Jeff says he becomes an instant top 3 quarterback in Atlanta, but it's not like he's going to have an elite offense around him right away.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, and I can see this being a possibility if they make some adjustments, but they lost Russell Gage. They've lost Calvin Ridley. Kyle Pitts is going to be awesome next year. We saw a lot from him last season. He's going to continue to grow. They've got to bring Cordell Patterson back. There's no guarantee he's coming in. Maybe they can draft a wide receiver, but they have so many other holes that I don't know if they really want to burn a top pick on a wide receiver. And then free agency, they don't really have a lot of cap space. Who knows what's going to happen with Matt Ryan? I don't know. I mean, there are receivers out there that could definitely help this offense, but the biggest issue is this offensive line.
Yeah.
The offensive line for the Falcons, they've been trying to fix this for 4 years. And they haven't had any positive results. They've gotten free agents, they've drafted, and nothing seems to work. Maybe it's Matt Ryan is the problem, who knows? It's interesting. All these teams that want to bring in Deshaun Watson, none of them have offensive lines. Maybe if they had lines, they wouldn't need to go out and get quarterbacks.
Feels like maybe Seattle should be the team he wants to go to, right?
Don't think so.
Anyway, he just wants to play.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think Deshaun Watson wants to pass the ball. And I mean, we just saw Pete Carroll run out of town another elite passing quarterback in Russell Wilson. So I would actually say that's probably Pete Carroll's kind of just taken Seattle off the market for marquee quarterbacks right now.
Okay, yeah, maybe the Saints would be a good fit as well. But for fun here, let's just say that the Falcons do land Watson. What does that mean for Matt Ryan, Pierce?
It's a bit of a mess because, I mean, not necessarily for Matt Ryan, but the Falcons now, they have to trade him or cut him. And, well, everyone's going to know that they're just going to have to cut him. So why trade? Why would you trade resources for Matt Ryan? You just wait for the Falcons to have to release him, and then you pick him up. So the Falcons get really nothing out of this. We should have traded him a week ago when we were talking about this. Now his value, if they bring in Watson's almost nothing. It could be worse. It could be San Francisco, who are seemingly stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo now with nowhere to go with him or cut him. Either of those two quarterbacks, if they get cut, the place for them to land is going to be Indianapolis. Indianapolis has got the salary cap. They've got the players around. That would be a great location for either of these quarterbacks to land.
I mean, Jeff, let's say like Houston and Atlanta come to some kind of deal where they end up swapping quarterbacks. Like Ryan could make that team not necessarily a contender, but bring him into wild card contention in a weak division.
No, I really don't think he could. And also let's just take that a step further. Matt Ryan has a no trade clause, so like he's not going to Houston. If Deshaun Watson goes to Atlanta, there's got to be a trade already worked out with the Indianapolis Colts. That's like the only way this can work. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but that's really the only way this is going to work. And it's got to be some kind of agreement where the restructured contract with Matt Ryan, the Colts have agreed to take it on. And that's it. I mean, but I just don't see any other scenario. I don't see Matt Ryan going to Houston. I don't see any other team coming in here and taking Matt Ryan. So there's got to be some kind of three-way deal worked out. And, the Falcons reworked Matt Ryan's contract. They free up some salary space for this year, but they can still just get out. If they can just get out of this albatross of a contract this year and just swallow the dead cap money, I don't know why they wouldn't, quite frankly. And everyone's side, well, they're not going to have any space to work with. Well, guess what? Sometimes just freeing yourself of something that's dragging your team down and been dragging your team down for a couple years is better than biting the bullet for another 2 years. So I think it actually makes sense for them to do it, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen. Now, let's say Deshaun Watson doesn't come in and maybe Indianapolis is still interested in this. Another name I would link to Atlanta is Jordan Love right now. He's kind of been linked there in some odds on the DraftKings Sportsbook at one time or another. And, again, this all comes down to, is this happening behind the scenes? We're not sure at this point. But if it does end up happening and Deshaun Watson doesn't go there, I think Jordan Love could end up in Atlanta somehow. I
mean, all Ryan would need to do in Indianapolis is go in there, run the offense, and not screw it up. Even Carson Wentz was able to put up like decent numbers there. It was the way the season ended that I think resulted in his departure in Indianapolis, guys. Some more quarterback news. Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield releasing a statement late last night. Kind of sounded like a goodbye. He says, I have no clue what happens next, but do you, Jeff? What's the market look like for him?
I mean, like he's kind of missed the boat, right? I mean, like the Steelers already, made their bed with Trubisky. I guess the Saints are still out there. Maybe Indianapolis takes a shot or something, but I don't think there's really a market for Baker Mayfield right now. I mean, this is a player who came into the NFL with a ton of bravado, kind of rubbed some people the wrong way, and he didn't back it up with his play on the field. And guess what? Nobody likes those kinds of people. These aren't the types of people that necessarily people say, oh, we'll give you a second chance. We'll try and rebuild around. I don't think there's really a big market for Baker Mayfield right now. If the Browns are going to move on from him, I kind of see him as just having to take some kind of swallow your pride backup deal. I mean, I threw it as a joke last night that maybe the Giants will sign him to back up Daniel Jones. But does that really sound so outlandish? I mean, the Giants are looking for someone to push Daniel Jones. They were linked to Mitch Trubisky. Maybe that is where Baker Mayfield ends up. I think at the very least he'll end up in that kind of scenario. Maybe he goes to the Saints and competes with Taysom Hill. Same kind of deal. But, I mean, this just sounds like Baker's out, and I think he's going to have a really hard time getting any kind of, bona fide spot where he starts as, like, the legitimate day one starter.
Pierce, is there any coming back from this? Because it sounds like he's out.
Yeah, but let's pump the brakes a little bit on reading these Instagram and Twitter posts. A couple weeks ago, we thought for sure Russell Wilson was going to go play for the Commanders, and that didn't seem to work out. So we will see if he does get released. Then I'm sure there'll be a place for him. Seattle doesn't seem like the craziest place. I mean, if he is healthy, we're giving Baker Mayfield a pretty hard time. Yeah, he has not lived up to expectations, but he was banged up a lot last season. That offense was banged up a lot last season. They lost a lot of players during different times, had some really serious COVID outbreaks. So we may be a little too harsh on Mayfield for whatever reason. If he gets back to being healthy and can move around, I mean, he's not as good as Russell Wilson, but he plays in that similar way of he can scramble, run around, and throw the deep ball. And you can see that fitting in Seattle, and those guys maybe not missing out on a year and possibly being playoff contenders if he's healthy.
And maybe we see.
I think the bigger question would be, what do the Browns do? Like, let's say they cut Baker and they don't get Deshaun Watson. What's the end game there for them? I mean, that's kind of the more interesting question. They just signed Amari Cooper, so I don't really have an answer for that one either.
All right, could we see Mayfield included as part of the compensation in any trade for Watson too? A lot of questions up in the air. I mean, that kind of came out of nowhere last night. But gentlemen, we're out of time. You two are free to go. We'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. Hot stove season is alive and well around Major League Baseball. We're going to dive into that right after we discuss the top DFS plays on a massive 12-game NBA slate. We've got a dozen games on the NBA menu tonight, and we have a dynamic DraftKings duo here to help you build those DFS lineups. So Gary and Thorne, Matt Meiselman, good to see both you dudes. Real quick, Gary, what impressed you the most about Kyrie's 60-point performance? 87 DK fantasy points against Orlando last night.
I mean, it's probably like the cliche answer, but as most of the world probably did, I had no inclination to watch a Brooklyn-Orlando game on a Tuesday night. I tuned in the fourth quarter when I heard something special was going on, and the Magic were essentially triple teaming Kyrie, and he was still able to get his shot off, and there were a lot of difficult shots, and I think he was still perfect shooting percentage in the fourth quarter. So that was probably the most impressive part to me, just him walking down the court, everyone in the building knowing he was going to try to get his shot up, and it still being just good shots and them falling. It was impressive.
I know, Matty, it was one of those things. I saw DraftKings tweet out at one point, these are video game-like numbers. And I'm like, no one's even this good in video games. But he had 41 at the half. So the history was really being made in the first two quarters. Most by an NBA player in the first two quarters since Kobe 2 decades ago here, dude. This dude is a part-time employee, is an incredible basketball player, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, he really is. And it was a really good matchup, so I guess we can knock him a little if we really want.
Yeah.
And maybe some people do put up those kinds of numbers in video games. I have had some pretty solid 2K franchises with really good players that have put up some big numbers in individual games. But yeah, it was ridiculous to watch. I turned that game off late second quarter just because I was rooting for the Magic, unfortunately, and it was over very fast. But you have to just be impressed with what he was doing.
Yep.
It was one of the best scoring performances probably of the entire season. That could be up there with anything that anyone's done this year. Yeah,
I think it did tie a season best around the NBA. Also, shout out to RotoWire's Nick Whalen, who is not here today, but yesterday he said, I'm going to pay up. I'm going to roster Kyrie Irving, and if you did just that, you got 87 DK fantasy points. As for tonight, we're going to start with the big ones. So, Garrett Bear, who are you building around at center?
Well, ironically enough, old news 60-point game guy, Karl Anthony Towns. Sucks for Carl.
Another New Jersey guy.
Had it for 24 hours, and then Kyrie overshadowed him. It's really not about the 60-point performance, though. This is all about matchup for me. Yes, Dwight Howard is going to be available for the Lakers tonight, but they are a team that is way too small. They are just not equipped to deal with someone like Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean, the Lakers literally in their last game against the Raptors gave up 19 offensive rebounds. I just see Cat dominating the paint, dominating the glass. This is someone who the last 4 games he's been forced to play at least 30 minutes. And again, the Timberwolves play some weird scripts just because they're as up-tempo as they are and they're as bad defensively as they are. But 30 minutes, not that big a threshold to clear for a star NBA player. He's averaging 69.9 DraftKings points in those games. It's a little bit skewed because of that 60-point performance, but he's also been able to score at least 50 DraftKings points in all 4 of those contests. So the floor is so high when he's just given an average workload, which I think he'll get tonight. I just, again, don't see the Lakers with the bodies on the interior to be able to handle him.
Okay, Matty, how much money you want to spend here for your building block at center?
I think I want to spend a medium amount because I do think the chalky plays are going to be at both the high end and the low end. Paying up for Karl-Anthony Towns off his 60-point game I think will be at least somewhat common. The reason he won't be overly popular is because Nikola Jokic is on this slate. You can play Giannis at center. You can play LeBron at center. And then there are cheaper guys to play like Precious Achiuwa is way underpriced. So I'm going to the middle with Clint Capella, who I think will probably start performing at a level that we are more familiar with from previous seasons, and he hasn't done it yet this year. The best thing working for Capella right now is that John Collins is injured, and normally the Hawks will play a lot of lineups with Collins at the 5, but without him, they really are sticking to 2 true centers in the rotation with Capella and Okongwu. And then we also have Danilo Gallinari, who is banged up and may or may not play. So I think Capella's minutes are really secure, and this is also a great matchup against the Hornets, very up-tempo team. Should just be a lot of stats to go around for this entire game. It has a 240-point total. So Capella's only 6,100. I think if we look at him in a couple of weeks, his price probably will be a bit higher. And in this matchup, too, I think he's a really good play.
Yeah, who better to pair up with his pick-and-roll partner, Trae Young, than Clint Capella. I like it. All right, let's go to the forward department. Who is a forward worth building your lineup around, Matty?
I'm going to stick with the same team, and this is really the same, a lot of the same analysis with DeAndre Hunter at 4,800. So again, Collins is out, more for Hunter to do, and then I think if Gallinari's out, that's an even larger increase in Hunter's responsibility for the team. He's been playing a lot of minutes, and I think the big fantasy game just hasn't been there. And again, this is just such a strong spot for Atlanta against Charlotte. And to me, this slate sort of sets up as stars and scrubs, where a lot of the popular plays will be sub 4K and then also very expensive, especially if we get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ruled out. A lot of these cheaper Oklahoma City players will become priorities above the 4, 5, and 6K range. So I think Hunter is probably relatively contrarian too. And I think that that's the case for really all of the Hawks tonight, despite this big total. So I'm really interested in this spot.
Gary, which forward stands out to you?
Yeah, I was going to mention DeAndre Hunter, so I'll pivot here to a guy who is more expensive. This is not a similar asset type on this slate, but I do think it's worth mentioning Julius Randle, who has been playing some of the best basketball of his season the past 2 weeks. Now, that's not the highest bar to clear in the world, considering the Knicks' 2021-2022 campaign, but you've got Randle with essentially a 35% usage rate and averaging 1.5 DraftKings points per minute across his last 4 games. Matchup against the Trailblazers tonight, which, obviously there are a lot of different outcomes. There are a lot of different ways this game could get out of control, although I do think with Tibbs' track record of just running his starters into the ground and, the Knicks' track record of blowing giant leads, that I wouldn't worry too much about Randle's minutes load here. I think maybe you don't see the ceiling of a 38 or a 40-minute performance, but I still think he's going to play somewhere in the range of 30 to 34 minutes in this contest. And Portland's defense has just been absolutely atrocious the last 10 games. They're giving up over 120 opponent points per 100 possessions. So I just think this is a fantastic spot for Randle, who really seems like he is finding himself and is in a groove right now. So I'll ride with him.
All right, Matty, a guard with building block potential here. You consider the Capella Trae Young stack?
Yeah, I actually do think that's worth considering, but I don't want to go all three Hawks, so I'll just leave that one to the side. I do like it in theory, but I'll pay up for Luka Doncic for the guard spot. I think he might be a little less popular than LeBron and Giannis and possibly Towns. I'm not really sure how people are going to react to that 60-point game, but I do think more people are going to pay up at the forward and center spots because this is a slate that should have a lot of guard value plays. And Luka gets a really good matchup against the Nets, who are not a great defensive team right now. I think they really need Ben Simmons for that element. We talked about Kyrie Irving. I think their offense is fine. They don't need Ben Simmons to be good enough at offense to win a championship. But for defense, especially on a back-to-back, I do worry about them. And Luka obviously is a great fantasy player. You don't really need to sell him too hard on any given slate. But I think the fact that the Nets are not a great defensive team and also that they just played last night, have to travel home from Orlando, it sets up well for Doncic, who has just been amazing almost every time out. So I think the combination of the good matchup and the low ownership make him pretty appealing.
Yeah, currently leading the NBA with a 37% usage rate, and it's been even higher since that Porzingis trade. Gary, who you looking at in the guard?
Yeah, Matt alluded to this situation earlier, but it is worth talking about. I think there's probably like an 85 to 90% chance that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does not play tonight. I think the Thunder have pretty much showed their hand the last season and a half when it comes to these injuries. I mean, we didn't see SGA at all in the second half of last season, and yes, there was some plantar fasciitis, but I think there's probably pretty good reason to think that it was not quite as bad as the team made it out to be. This is a team that literally announced 2 weeks ago that 3 of their rotation players were just going to be out for the rest of the season because they all had surgery on the same day. I think the Thunder know what they want to do, and if there's any reason at all to consider like the future of the player, their franchise cornerstone, I think they probably play it pretty safe with SGA tonight. So we're probably going to see a situation where the Thunder don't have Giddey, they don't have SGA, they obviously don't have Lou Dort. So Trey Mann, who's a little above 5K, I think is going to be a really popular play. And he's probably going to be, quote unquote, the lead guard for this team. But I think Theo Maledon is another name that is going to be popular, as Matt was talking about, because he's less than 4K. But, this is someone who's started the last 2 games for the Thunder. So I think his minutes load is pretty secure, even dependent on the script of this contest. But the matchup here is also really nice. I mean, the Spurs across their last 10 games are second in pace and have the 4th worst defensive rating in basketball across that span. So there aren't many talented offensive players left on the Thunder if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander isn't playing, but I still think because of the matchup, some of these scrub Thunder guys are going to be able to put up some big numbers.
All right, before you guys take off, let's hit up the DK Sportsbook here. Matt, what's your favorite bet on the NBA board?
I'm going to go with a team that just let me down in a big way the other night with the Utah Jazz, who got Rudy Gobert back and actually wound up being favored against the Bucks after opening as 2-point underdogs. The line moved 4 points from +2 to -2. They still ended up losing the game. But I think the Jazz are just way underperforming right now, and they are going to turn it around. This team has just been too good for too many years. The roster is almost identical to what it's been. And I think maybe there's some reason to be concerned about Rudy Gobert's calf, but I think the team is in good shape. There's nothing really fundamentally wrong with them. They've just faced some tough opponents and had some tough games. So with them healthy and with the Bulls, despite having Alex Caruso back, which I do think is a very big deal, the Bulls are banged up. I mean, DeMar DeRozan has to be wearing down a little bit. Zach LaVine has been dealing with a knee injury. Nikola Vucevic has ended up on the injury report a bunch of times and is playing through something. So I think the Bulls are a little bit hurt right now, and the Jazz are just a much better team. So I have no problem laying 6 points with them. I think this line should be a few points higher than that.
All right, Garion.
Yeah, I got worried for a second. I feel like sometimes Matt and I end up on the other side of games, and it always makes me a little just weary. I am in lockstep here. I think the Jazz -6 is the best bet on the board. For everything he just said about the Jazz, but also the Bulls in particular, this is just a team that time and time again has shown us they do not compete with, I don't know if you want to say very good teams or elite teams, but they are 1-7 ATS their past 8 games against teams with a winning percentage above 600, which is a category the Jazz very much fall into. The Bulls do not beat the best teams in the East and Western conferences. It just is the way it's been all season long. They've also been really bad on the road. They're 0-5 ATS their past 5 road games. They're 1-7 ATS overall in their past 8 games, while the Jazz, for all their struggles, for all their injury woes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're still boasting the second best net rating in basketball at home. We know for the past half decade, the Jazz have just been one of the best ATS teams at home. So I'm going to continue with that trend, knowing that Chicago just has to prove it against a really good team.
All right, bro amigos, adios. We are done talking basketball. What the latest MLB trades and free agency moves mean for DFS and sportsbook odds when we come back. All right, welcome back to The Sweat, everybody. I'm Emerson Lotzia. The first weekend of the post-lockout world has been anything but a disappointment. There's been a flurry of baseball transactions, and we still don't know where guys like Carlos Correa, Chris Bryant, and Freddie Freeman are going, unless that news has dropped in the past 5 seconds, and I've missed it. DraftKings contributors and best friends, Steve Buchanan and Nick Fryer. They are here to discuss all the moves and what it means for DFS and sports betting. So the Braves bring in all-star first baseman, that's Matt Olson, in a trade with the A's. So, Bukes, how does he fit into that Atlanta lineup, man?
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive move for the Braves. Like, you can't replace somebody like Freddie Freeman, who's one of the more prolific hitters in all of baseball right now. But you bring in a guy who is years younger, is stellar defensively, and is going to have a massive, uptick in his production in this Braves lineup. Like, he was in the Oakland Athletics lineup. They're okay. They're not an offensive juggernaut. This team could be that offensive juggernaut in the National League. Olsen in the middle of that is going to be a massive run producer. He's going to be a huge fantasy asset going forward, and he's going to be really good defensively too as well. I know the Braves gave up a lot to get him, but this is somebody that they're going to build their future around. 8-year contract. He's going to be huge in Atlanta.
Yeah, Nick, Olsen, Gold Glove winner, 2018-2019. Steve nailed the defense.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's a great move for them. Of course, it's a great pivot because he's still not Freddie Freeman in the end. I mean, that is a huge loss for them. But you are cutting your losses with this move. I do like it a lot. Of course, you have Steve kind of highlighted how much better the Braves lineup is. Everybody knows. I mean, after what they did last year. But you got Albies, you got Riley, you got Duvall, Swanson, and now you have the DH kind of mixed in too. So I think that's going to make things a lot easier where if they want to stack up a little bit more. Of course, whenever Ronald Acuna gets back, if we see him, later on in the season, hopefully, after his injury last season. But yeah, I think this is a great move. Of course, if they're doing this, they have to be convinced Freeman is going elsewhere, which is unfortunate for them because I do think this is a slight step down despite the age difference, but still a great move for the Braves.
Yeah, so Nick, Freeman done in Atlanta. Where's the best fit for him? I know your Sox reportedly in the conversation now and just lost Kyle Schwarber this morning to the Phillies. Also, you got to think the Jays are probably out on him too after trading for Matt Chapman.
Yeah, I was thinking the Jays, but then we see that Chapman move today. Yeah. The Red Sox would make a lot of sense. You could put Devers at DH and put Dahlbeck at third base. I think that would be a sound move. My biggest thing is anywhere but the Dodgers, please. I know we keep seeing them pop up. I don't need to see them go and buy another guy. They're turning into they've already turned into the West Coast Yankees in that regard. And also, like the Yankees, they don't win anything either, so it kind of makes sense. The scariest one for me actually would be because we've seen the Rays pop up a little bit here. You add him to the Rays, a franchise that just knows how to win. I mean, that would be that would create a huge problem for the AL East, which is already a tough division as it is, especially when you're adding different guys into the mix now with the Jays. But I do think we haven't seen a whole lot from some of the other West Coast teams. I think we've seen reports about the Padres now being interested in him with the Tatis injury. I think, you go and add him, that's going to create problems. The Giants haven't been brought up, but I'd love to see them add him after losing Posey this year too. But the Rays would be my pick for the scariest move for Freeman.
Okay, Steven, I've seen the Dodgers, Padres, Rays, and Red Sox.
Yeah, look, all those teams, would love to have Freddie Freeman in there. Like, I know the buzz about the Red Sox has been heating up over the past couple of days, but, like, it just seems like a backwards move for them, which is kind of strange. Like, I would love to have Freddie Freeman on the Red Sox, don't get me wrong. But they got a really strong farm system coming up, so it doesn't make sense to pay for Freddie Freeman, who's over the age of 30. Not saying he's old by any means, but you have guys that are ready to come up and play that position. Quite frankly, I think the Rays, like Nick was mentioning, is fine. But, look, we don't want him to go to the Dodgers because of how much they have. But, I mean, from a production standpoint, good Lord, you can't get a better lineup to be in than that one there. From a fantasy perspective, that is the best landing spot for him to be surrounded by some of the guys that they have in that lineup would be absolutely absurd. So I think that makes a lot of sense from him. To get that final contract, to get the big money there, the production would be there, and they have to pitch him because they can't pitch around him because of the other players that are surrounded by him. So I think the Dodgers makes the most sense. I just don't know they're going to be able to pull the trigger at this point.
Bukes, I know you were all smiles when your Mariners acquired Winker and Suarez from the Reds. Like, the AL East, or AL West title rather, is theirs to lose, is it not?
It is right now. And, you could have got them at 6-1. Already did that myself to win the division. They make all these moves. Now it's plus 450. So, maybe the ship is already sailing. You can still get on it now. But look, that move just solidifies how good this lineup is going to be. If you look at that lineup right now, they realistically have, 2 through 7 guys that can all hit 20-plus home runs in that lineup. Not to mention, they have the best pitcher in all of baseball, Robbie Ray, the reigning Cy Young Award winner. You know that one there. I don't have to go into the details of that one. At the helm, as their ace there. So this team is going to be so good. The Rangers, they loaded up their lineup, but they're also going to give up 13 runs per game. The A's, they'll be at the bottom of the division. Astros, overrated. Angels, what are they going to do? They'll be down there, too, in the basement, do whatever they want. They can't win at all. Mariners, winning the division. We were close last year. We're getting it this year.
Nick, how close are your expectations for this Mariners lineup to Steve's?
So I got to say this Winker move is probably my favorite post-lockout move so far. I'm a big Winker guy. Did really well for me last season whenever talking about fantasy stuff. But I don't know if I'm going to go and give them the AL West crown yet. However, I do think that they're going to make the postseason, and they're plus 165 to make the postseason this year. So I still think if you're not as high as Steve is, and Steve, I do understand it because, the Astros, if you don't believe in them, then yes, I would think the Mariners are going to be the team to win the division because I don't buy into the Angels and the other two teams forget about it. But I think that it's a much smarter bet to just back them to make the postseason this year at plus 165 between Reyes and Robbie Ray. Winker and Robbie Ray, excuse me. I mean, this might be the best offseason that any team's had so far this year. You're adding those two guys to a 90-win team last year, so the Mariners did a great job with this.
Yeah, I mentioned Schwarber to the Phillies. You're starting to see these National League teams obviously sign some DHs now. Nationals have their first guy signing Nelson Cruz to a one-year deal. How much fantasy appeal is there for Cruz in Washington, Nick, as the designated hitter?
Well, I think you're going to a better ballpark, so that's going to help out for sure. They have that's going to be huge for Nelson Cruz. But the other thing is, I think you look at him early in the season, and he's going to probably be a little depleted when it comes to price because he did so poorly when he moved to the Rays. So I think this is a guy who early on in the season I'm not saying he's going to go and be like a value play necessarily, but for the production he can provide, he will be. So I think this is a guy you want to look at earlier in the year. Just on the sole fact is change of setting, different ballpark, going to make a big difference for him.
Yeah, Steve, even as he ages here into his 40s, he hits for power and average, which that's a tremendous asset for your fantasy team.
I mean, that's what really the DH is for guys like this who, are a liability in the field but can produce at the plate. Quite frankly, I think the biggest ramification of this is that teams are going to have to pitch to Juan Soto now. They didn't have to pitch to him last year because there was nobody surrounding him. Now you put someone like Nelson Cruz in there, who is always a threat to hit one out, especially against left-handed pitching. So if anything, I think this actually is a huge boost to Juan Soto because he finally has some protection in that lineup. Now, the rest of the lineup, I can't say a lot about. There's not much to be excited about if you're a Nationals fan, but at least it was the step in the right direction. This is what the universal DH should always have been about. Cruz can keep playing. He can keep playing at a high pace at the plate, and it does some wonders for Juan Soto as well.
Yeah, Nick mentioned earlier in this segment that Freeman's name's coming up with the Padres because of that Tatis injury. Guys, Fernando Tatis Jr., could miss up to 3 months after showing up to spring training with a fractured wrist. There's some rumors that it was a motorcycle accident. He had more than one. His words, not mine. How much of a damper is that on San Diego's division hopes, though, Steve?
Yeah, look, I mean, that division is going to be one of the toughest in the National League. Like, we saw a Giants team that, we continues to be like, okay, they're playing well, but it's going to drop off. Okay, it's going to drop off. Okay, it's going to drop off. Okay, it's not dropping off. They're actually going. And they end up being one of the best teams in all of baseball record-wise. Then you have the Dodgers, who are doing everything in their power to, maintain that NL West dominance. The thing with Tatis has been, in his short career, he's been back on the field rather quickly when he has, like, these catastrophic injuries, it feels like. Remember last year when he took that swing, crumpled to the ground, and it was like, dude, the guy just went, it looked like he was paralyzed or something, the way he went down. He was back in a couple of weeks. Not saying that this is going to happen here again, but at least we've seen Tatis has been, a fast healer and can get back on the field. And the power hasn't been affected. That shoulder injury, basically they were saying popping out of place, yet he comes back and starts hitting bombs longer than it was before. So it's a damper, but there's still a lot of good free agents out there that can help fill that void. Chris Bryant's still in the mix. Freddie Freeman, those are guys that they can still bring in and would have a role, obviously, when Tatis comes back too as well, to make that lineup even tougher. So the Padres are still very much in the mix. They have a very, very loaded team. They're just in a really tough division.
Yeah, man. Nick, he has MVP potential, but this team has to be concerned with his durability. He's been injured in each of his first 4 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, and if he's riding motorcycles all the time, I mean, look, it's his choice, but that's going to be a thing. I feel like that was a thing years ago with maybe Jeff Kent or somebody where that got put in his contract that you couldn't write it. I could be making that up. But either way, that is definitely going to be a concern moving forward on top of the stuff that happens on the field. But Steve kind of hit on it pretty well, I think, when you're talking about that division. I mean, I'm always a believer in the Giants. I'm always going to give them a shot going into the season because I just think ever since the Bruce Bochy era, they have turned into just a quality organization that is usually going to put out a good team on the field, and you can never really count them out. And you're going to go and have this guy, even if it would be just a month, Emerson, with Fernando Tatis out, I think that could be devastating for when we're talking about them winning the division, because there's going to be at least 25 games where you're not going to have Fernando Tatis Jr. out there, one of the best players in the game right now. If you add Freddie Freeman or Chris Bryant, yes, that's going to make a huge difference, and then you're going to be fine. But I think if you're talking about betting it on DK Sportsbook, when you're talking about Padres winning the division, I might hold off a little bit on that until we see if they make a move with one of those two guys, because if they don't get one of those two, if they don't get a big free agent signing to make up for this for the short term, then I can't imagine them winning the division this year.
Yeah, Dodgers the favorite in that division, -170. And then you got the Padres +290 and Giants +400 on the DK Sportsbook. Oh, man. You got the Diamondbacks and Rockies at +10,000. Don't sleep on those guys. Ooh, yeah.
No, sleep on them.
No, go ahead and do it. All right. Good stuff. Good advice. Thanks for the help, guys. We'll do that hockey right after this. 4 games around the NHL to talk about tonight, and we'll do just that with the riveting RotoWire duo of AJ Scholes and Paul Bruno. AJ already in the St. Patrick's Day spirit. He's not going to be here tomorrow, so go ahead and start it up early, dude. No one's ever complained about that. Who is your favorite DFS play at center? Go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, no AJ tomorrow. We'll be enjoying the St. Patrick's Day festivities, so I figured I'd bring it here today. In terms of those DFS takes today, I liked the idea of riding Elias Lindholm here at 6,500 for Calgary. He's slightly less expensive than the top 4 guys at the center position tonight. He had an 8-game point streak riding before Sunday's matchup with Colorado. I don't anticipate he'll go too long without getting back on the score sheet. So I'll stick with the Flames tonight, and look for other centers maybe a little bit further down for the rest of my lineup.
Paul, how about you, dude?
I like the call on Lindholm, but I also would mention Braden Point in the same breath. Another mismatch ahead for the Tampa Lightning. This team is not playing very well. They lost 3 of their last 4, and I think they're going to take it out on the expansion club tonight, and that means Braden Point will be front and center. 6,800 price tag, 8 points in his last 10 games. I say I'm all in on that. And then in a value play, I'm looking at Tim Stützle of Ottawa. He gets a matchup against Columbus. Their goaltending defense, not the top in the league by any stretch of the imagination. And Stützle's been on a pretty nice roll with 9 points in his last 10 games, coming in at $4,600 tonight.
Okay, how about your favorite play at wing, Paul?
Well, it's a big night ahead for Tampa, so I'm doubling down on that by a call on Nikita Kucherov, $8,000 for a guy who's got 10 points in the last 10 games, 35 shots on goal. He's going to pad those numbers tonight. And then we go back to Calgary for the Johnny Goudreau look, $7,000. The price is a little bit lower than it ought to be, I think. 6 goals and 14 points in total over the last 10 with 30 shots on goal. I think his floor is at least 15 DK points tonight. And then Patrick Laine, another guy that I would consider, $6,300 for a guy who's been shooting the lights out in Columbus for weeks now. And he's pouring the shots on goal, 31 in his last 10 and 5 goals in that stretch. And then a value play at the wing position, Tyler Toffoli's been going wild since joining the Calgary. This guy likes it out there, I think. 6 goals and 11 points, 33 shots on goal for only $4,200. A great value on the board tonight.
All right, AJ, who is your dude at wing?
Yeah, I like the call on Nikita Kucherov with the Lightning. I think Paul's right. They have a chance to really crush the Kraken tonight. So for me, I actually am also going to use Steven Stamkos. They're going to actually move him to the center to play alongside Kucherov on that top line, which is just bonus for us that we get these 2 wingers on the same line. And while you're at it, if you're paying 66 for Stammer and 8 for Kucherov, you might as well toss in Killorn, who's going to round out that third line. He comes in at 3,400 here. I also want to mention the Kraken's penalty kill has been 3rd worst in the league in the month of March at just 61%. So I think this is a great time to get multiple shares of the Bolts PP, and you do that with Stammer and Kucherov.
All right, let's go to favorite DFS play back on the blue line. AJ, you're up.
Well, this is going to come as no surprise, but let's go back to Tampa PP1 here and go with Victor Hedman at 6,800. It's pricey. He's 2nd highest on the board behind Werenski, but it's just too good of a matchup to avoid going with those Lightning guys tonight. If you want another option, Damon Severson continues to anchor the number 2 power play for the Devils. He's got an okay floor of 21 shots in his last 10 games, plus 11 hits as well. And the 2 points he scored in his last 4 games have both come with the man advantage. So plenty of opportunities there, and will save you a little bit of money if you don't want to pay up all the way for Hedman.
Paul, who's your guy on the blue line?
AJ's razor sharp since he's been back from that imposed 1 week off, isn't he? I picked 2 of my guys. Hedman is a great pick, particularly tonight. I think we're going to see a lopsided score there. But I'm on 2 other games for a little more value play. Thomas Chabot, a guy who has been really revving up his offense, 9 points in his last 10 games, 37 shots on goal over that stretch, which is really impressive for a defenseman. He's playing over 25 minutes a game and should be well worth the $6,400 tonight. But in the value range, I still don't understand why Rasmus Andersson's price is so low. $4,300 for a guy who's playing the quarterback role on the top power play for one of the top teams in the league over the last month and a half. And 9 points on his part for the last 10 games. I think he adds to those totals tonight.
Hey, Paul, let's wrap things up here over on the DK Sportsbook. Your favorite bet on this slate?
I'm looking at a trio of bets in the puck line / total goal props in this range here, and I haven't touched this much this season, but I like the 3 games tonight. Tampa at Seattle, of course, we've been all over it. The prop goes win for Tampa and over 5.5 goals, that gets you a 185 payoff. That's a cinch bet. Then New Jersey at Calgary, take Calgary minus 1.5 over New Jersey for a 170 payoff. And then Boston at Minnesota, I say take the home side here. Boston's on the second of back-to-backs. Minnesota minus 1.5 and the over of 5.5 for a 380 payoff.
All right. Let's go, AJ. Bring us home.
Well, Ottawa and Columbus have been leaking goals in the month of March, with both clubs conceding over 4 goals per game over that stretch. Their offenses have struggled a little bit of late, but with how bad these clubs have been defensively, I think you still take the over, even though it's set at 6.5. You're getting even money return there. Honestly, I'd consider taking the over in every one of these games tonight. If you really want to get crazy, you can take parlay the overs on the DK Sportsbook for plus 1266. I think it's a great opportunity to stack these or parlay these together and get some awesome value.
Good stuff as always, guys. AJ, enjoy responsibly tomorrow, please. We'd love to see you back on Friday. Paul, we'll catch you tomorrow with Pete. We'll bring it home with our golf guys right after our final break. All right, the final stop of the Florida Swing tees off tomorrow at the Valspar Championship. And here to chase your fate, some DraftKings salaries, DK contributor Reed T. Fowler and RotoWire senior golf writer Len Hochberg. 5 players will cost at least $10K. Chase or fade, one of them is worth targeting, Sweet T.
I'm going to chase Emerson. I almost wore my PGA shirt today on the show, so
you know what?
matchy.
We got the
tonight,
slate.
We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
hey,
see. 5
let's do
PM,
it.
Tune in. But yeah, I'm going to chase a Colin Morikawa, and not like, oh, surprise. Colin Morikawa is really good at golf. Of course he is. $10,700. Look, I don't put any stock into the missed cut last week, not at all. I also don't put a ton of stock, even though it was fantastic for DJ to shoot 9 under par on the final round. I do like that. I think he sets up well here, but I do think all of these guys are going to, their ownership and their roster percentage is going to be pretty even throughout all 5. I think a lot are going to JT, Ulrich included. But I just think when you have best ball striker and a guy who gained over almost 6 strokes with his putter at Genesis and came runner-up, a guy who on Sundays, if he's anywhere near the lead, you are scared if you're on top the lead and he's chasing, especially 16 through 18, that snake pit. That's going to be tough. So give me Colin Morikawa at the top.
All right, who do you want here, Len?
Yeah, I agree with Reed in that I do like Colin Morikawa. Colin Morikawa and Xander Schauffele, the 2 of the 5 who missed the cut at the Players last week, and I give them a little bit of an edge. You know, it was a grueling 5 days. I think it was 5, could have been 8 that they played that tournament. You know, it'll be interesting to see the guys who had meaningful play on Sunday, how they will respond. That's all the way up and down the whole field at the Valspar. Dustin Johnson looked great with a 63, but that were very soft conditions. That was his one good round, and really in a long time. I'd like to see more from him before jumping back on the DJ bandwagon. I do like Justin Thomas as well. He did play the Players. He did sort of have meaningful time on the course on Monday, but he didn't play Bay Hill the week before, so he should be able to recover pretty quickly. Victor Hovland's been playing a lot of golf. I know he's only 12 years old and can recover very quickly, but I like Colin Morikawa and JT. I think I'm just piggybacking Reed right there.
All right, so let's go to Sam Burns. He won this event last year. He's 9,600. He didn't look very good on the West Coast, but did end up finishing, got a top 10 at Bay Hill, 26 at the Players. Let's see, chase or fade that he's going to make another run here, Len. He's comfortable on these greens.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the defending champion, he had a really rough Monday, excuse me, at the Players, and you know, he really had a chance to win, and he tumbled all the way out of the top 25. I don't know how much going to take out of him. You know, I wrote earlier this week that I think just showing up at the Valspar, site of his first title, he's a big man on campus. He'll be well received coming back. You know, I kind of thought that he'd be re-energized. I'm not quite so sure now. I guess I'm still leaning towards Sam Burns, but it's not as strong a lean as it was 2 days ago for me.
All right. How about you? How do you feel about the defending champ here, Reed?
Yeah, you also look at the par fives last year. He destroyed these par fives, and that was really the reason. Well, not really, but a big portion of why he won. But here's the thing about Sam Burns, Mr. Burns, is that Arnold Palmer, he came in top 10. Yeah, he was ninth at the Arnold Palmer, then played 15 rounds at the Players, and competitive right for the first 4 days, and just faltered on the fifth. And he's gonna play the WGC match play, and he's probably here only because, right? I was talking with Mayo this morning on the show that he's here because he's a defending champion. But you would think that if he wasn't, he probably would withdraw. Because look at Paul Casey; he's won this event twice, and he's like, you know what? I can't do it. Look, Sam Burns is much younger than Paul Casey, but now you're gonna talk about 4 or 5 tournaments in a row for Sam Burns. That scares me a little bit. Give me a guy right above him at $9,700, Shane Lowry, and what he did last week. Yes, he's also played both of those tournaments the last 2 weeks, or 2 tournaments in the last 3 weeks in Florida. But I'm much more like him at $9,700, and the roster percentage, projected roster percentage, being a little bit lower there.
Lowry had that nice ace on 17 over the weekend too.
Looks like me out there.
Place absolutely erupted. Seriously, man, you have a sweet,
we
sweet
saw your
swing.
attempt at the 17th green a while back on the old IG, and it was not great.
Listen, I found the water just like 30 guys did on Saturday at TPC Sawgrass. We are one of them. They are one of us. Keegan Bradley, though, guys, little run at the Players, made one. Costly penalty, though, really hurting him. But 5th place, that doesn't suck. Chase or fade, you're willing to pay $8,400 for him this week, Reed.
I'll fade, even though loves this course. He's probably going to be a first-round leader because what he does in the first rounds here is fantastic. But I'm going to fade him just because of what he did on Sunday, Monday, and a lot of people flocking to $8,400 Keegan Bradley. I'll take a $100 increase for Gary Woodland at $8,500, 2 top 5s, right in the last 3 events on Florida courses. He should have won at Bay Hill, but he just didn't put it all together. He chunked one in the sand. Looks like you. But I'm going to take Gary Woodland. You know, he won this in 2011. It was his first PGA Tour win at the 2011 Transitions Championships. Give me Gary Woodland.
Yeah, Len, he seems to be a wise selection in the state of Florida, too. And it feels like this course is a good fit for him, as long as he's not, like, drained mentally.
Yeah, I would think that of all the players who had meaningful time on the course on Monday, nobody walked off feeling worse than Keegan Bradley. I mean, he had a real chance to win the tournament, and then he blew up on 17 and on 18. Similarly, he was challenging Sam Burns here last year, and he also doubled, I think it was 13, something, not quite as late in the tournament, but he torpedoed his chances again. Sam Burns actually won by 3, but it was a lot closer a few holes earlier. $8,400 is going to be a very attractive price. We don't need a whole lot from Keegan Bradley to match his $8,400 price tag, but I think he's going to be a little bit tired this week. I'm going to fade Keegan Bradley.
All right, guys, we'll get you out of here with this. Slate-approved pick, your favorite DFS play at the Valspar Championship, Reed.
Shane Lowry, $9,700. I think he sets up really well. I talk about long iron approaches, putting, everything. Shane Lowry.
All right, Len, bring us home.
Yeah, this is such a hard week. I don't even, I'm going to say Matt Fitzpatrick because he's never won, and this is a crazy week with so many variables. He's playing well in Florida, sort of becoming Mr. Florida. Didn't play well last week. We're going to, give him a pass on that, but he's really doing everything well. Top 40 in just about every strokes gained category, just across the board, good player, really sharp tee to green putter. If he's ever going to win, this is it.
Yeah, it's been a good season for first-time winners. There was that stretch there. I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row, I think, with a first-time winner. Len, appreciate you as always, dude. Reed, we will see you tonight, 5 o'clock on the slate with Jeff. We will dive even deeper into some golf salaries and some odds. So appreciate you watching, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow here on St. Patrick's Day. Adios.
Fade Louis.